Viewer discretion is advised. When I was in elementary school, one of the boys a few grades ahead of me was Kyle Doobie. I was 2 or 3 grades below him, so I didn't have much interaction with him outside of recess. He often made it a point to stand right behind me and yank on my pigtails as hard as he could, under the pretense that I was a horse and he was riding me. He also used to bring knives to school and would sometimes threaten some of his classmates with them when they did something to make him angry. And at one point he actually pulled a knife on a young girl. It was after school behind one of the buildings. Why nothing was officially ever done about it, I couldn't tell you. But my school, being very small, was not known for being on top of the disciplinary side of things. There was just something about Kyle, the hair pulling, and just the general way he acted, that ultimately made me feel uncomfortable whenever he was around. I wasn't alone in this regard. Former classmates have also expressed feeling uneasy in his presence. To my relief, he ended up moving away, and none of us heard anything about him for a number of years. Until one day he showed up on the local news, having been arrested for the murder of Nicole Cable. He had made a fake Facebook profile, lured her out of her house, kidnapped her, and left her in the back of his dad's pickup truck. His intention was to pretend to find her, so that he would be labeled a hero. When he found out that she was dead, he dumped her body in the woods and covered it with sticks and leaves. They found her about a week later. I was in school when I found out, and I had to go to the nurse's office because I felt so sick. It's very disconcerting to know that a murderer used to yank on my hair. As of writing this, he is going on trial in the next couple of days, which is what prompted me to share this experience.
This 20-year-old man from Maine showed up in a courtroom this week after a bizarre plot to kidnap his 15-year-old crush and then miraculously come to her rescue. Police say Kyle Doobie created a fake Facebook page to lure Nicole Cable out of her home and then get her to the end of her driveway. They say that that's where he was lying in wait, wearing a ski mask, that he allegedly grabbed her, duct taped her face, and then threw her into the back of his dad's pickup truck. The last time her mom saw her was when she was heading out the door.
I grew up in Detroit, Michigan. I attended the Dorothy Fisher Magnet Middle School. It was there that I met Patrick Selapak, and we became very good friends. He was smart, funny, charming, good-looking, and kind-hearted, or so I thought. We were friends until I moved out of the city of Detroit. I lost touch with Patrick when I was about 16, maybe 15 years old. I always wondered what happened to him, and I thought of him often over the years. In February of 2006, I heard about the murder of Melissa Barrels and her husband Scott. They only lived a few miles down the road from me. Melissa was 10 weeks pregnant. Patrick befriended Melissa after shopping at the grocery store that she worked at. He somehow convinced Melissa to allow him and his girlfriend Samantha to come and hang out with her for a while. He ended up hitting Melissa in the head with a gun. As she fell to the ground, he proceeded to strangle her with a belt. He convinced his girlfriend to help him because it was taking too long for her to die. During this, Melissa's husband came home. He was ambushed and hit in the head with a gun, and then locked in the bathroom while Pat and his girlfriend finished off Melissa. When she was dead, they turned their attention to Scott. Samantha went to CVS to get duct tape, syringes, and a few other things. They tried injecting bleach into Scott to kill him, but that didn't work. Scott was tortured for about 4 hours before he finally succumbed to his injuries. Patrick and Samantha moved the bodies to a back room. They wrapped them up in plastic and covered them with tarp before they left. Melissa's parents called the police to do a welfare check when she didn't show up for work. The police found the bodies in the tarp in the same room that they were decorating for the baby. Patrick and Samantha fled the Barrels' house in their car. They had also taken the couple's personal documents to assume their identities. Somehow, Pat and Samantha ended up in Flint, Michigan. They met someone at a nightclub who offered them a place to stay. They stayed with him for about 3 weeks before the man saw the news reports and tried to convince Patrick to turn himself in. The man walked outside, saying that he was going to call the police himself, and that's when Patrick shot the man in the back. They then wrapped this man's body up the same way they did with Scott and Melissa, and placed it in the back of the man's pickup truck. The next day, a friend of Samantha's called her and asked if she could give her a ride to a job interview. Samantha agreed. Before they showed up at the girl's house, she saw on TV that they were both wanted for murder. In a risky move, she still allowed them to pick her up for the interview. They drove the girl to the hotel where the interview was. She asked them to wait there for her, and said that it wouldn't take long. As soon as she got inside the hotel, she called the police. When the police arrived, they restrained Patrick and Samantha and found the body in the bed of the pickup truck they were driving. They both were sentenced to life in prison, without the possibility of parole. Patrick and Samantha were featured on the Investigation Discovery Channel in the show Wicked Attraction. The title of the episode is Single White Male, which aired in 2009. If anyone would like to verify this story, there are plenty of links on Google.
He knew he was going to prison for the rest of his life, and he made out like I don't even want to be bothered. I'm guilty.
He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
I am remorseful for what I've done. There's a fine line to show emotion when you go through what I go through, sitting in this house.
I lived in Menifee, California for over 3 years. During my time there, I attended the local high school, and let me just say, a lot of crazy stuff went down while I was there. One time, the librarian showed up at the school really early in the morning and shot herself in her car. The body was discovered during second period. The creepiest part was that I passed by that car while I was on my way to school that morning, and I didn't even notice. Another time, an undercover cop posing as a student was able to identify kids selling narcotics, and a huge drug bust ensued shortly after. Strangely enough, on that same day, while I was on my way to school, a guy I knew offered to sell me weed, to which I wisely declined. Later on, I saw that same guy arrested and escorted out of the classroom. This event closely mirrored the movie 21 Jump Street. However, there was one event that shook the entire community, and that was the disappearance and death of Terry Dwayne Smith Jr. The tragedy happened in the summer of 2013. I did not know who the boy was, but I did know his older brother Skylar. I knew him from my first period English class. I didn't interact with him all that much, even though he sat near me, but the times I did talk to him, he seemed friendly enough. He came off as a bit odd, but I didn't think much of it at the time. Something of note that did happen earlier on in the school year was a confrontation Skylar had with another student. Apparently the guy said something very offensive to Skylar, which really pissed him off. A fight broke out, and the student ended up getting a tooth knocked out. At the time, it was pretty funny to everyone, but this incident highlighted Skylar's violent nature. I had spent most of that summer hanging out with my trio of friends. One day, I was in my room doing nothing of interest, so I decided to go on Facebook. While on there, Skylar posted something that appeared on my news feed. He had stated that his younger brother had gone missing, and was letting his friends know to be on the lookout for him. I thought it was pretty unfortunate, but a part of me thought that Terry would eventually show up. It was either on that same day or the next. I was watching the news, and the number one topic was the disappearance of Terry. Apparently the situation was more severe than I initially thought. A community group was put together to search for the boy. As the days went on, more and more people got together to search for young Terry. I believe that Skylar made a few more posts about it on Facebook, but I don't remember exactly. However, I do remember him becoming a suspect, as he was the last person to see Terry alive. He was eventually taken into custody. I remember a lot of his friends being in denial and disbelief. They didn't think that he would have ever hurt Terry. I personally didn't know Skylar that well to make a judgment call. While in custody, Skyler changed his story several times about the last time he saw his younger brother. He told the police that they were home alone when Skyler decided that he wanted to get out of the house and hang out with some of his friends. Terry apparently followed him part of the way there, before Skyler told him that he couldn't tag along and told him to go back home. This set up the theory that Terry had been abducted on his way back home. Finally, after several days of searching, Terry's body was discovered behind the family home. The consensus was that Skyler had killed Terry for unknown reasons and tried to bury his body under a tree in the backyard. Skyler's mother, Shauna, was acting very strangely at the time and claimed that Terry had autism, and apparently at first she did not allow the police to investigate her property. After Terry's body was discovered, the search party was promptly called off, and a candlelit vigil was set up for Terry. In the aftermath, a lot of drama ensued. Terry's biological father came into town from the other side of the country and claimed that his ex-wife had lied about their son having autism and demanded to take his son's body back with him. He also sued Shauna for a large amount of money. I think it had something to do with child neglect or emotional distress. The two even appeared and debated on the Dr. Phil show, but nothing ever came out of it, besides what everyone already knew. Since Skyler was a minor, he was not tried as an adult and was found guilty of manslaughter. Apparently what happened was that the brothers were roughhousing, and things got out of hand. The mother would later suggest that Terry had hit his head on a table or something, and in a panic Skyler had tried to bury his brother's body. What is truly strange was that knowing what had happened, Skyler still went to Facebook to ask for help in finding his younger brother. Skyler was sentenced to 12 years and will stay in a juvenile detention center until he is 23.
Breaking news into the Press Enterprise newsroom. Skyler Adelano, the 16-year-old half-brother of Terry Dwayne Smith Jr., has been charged with murder. The boy's body was found buried in a shallow grave near the family's Menifee home early Wednesday morning.
I'm a 20-year-old male, and I run a large haunted house attraction. You pay to walk through, and we scare the lights out of you. We hold casting sessions about 3 weeks before the haunting season starts, and we always have interesting people show up. I develop a close connection with some of the actors throughout the season. A lot of haunters will tell you that this will develop a bond between people in some weird way. There was one kid that stood out to me during last year's audition. In fact, he impressed me so much that I allowed him to pick what scene he wanted to work. We never do that. We usually select the scenes that we want the actors to work. He ended up going with the butcher shop, and his performance was perfect. He scared the daylights out of the test group. We talked for about 3 hours after the test runs, and I'll never forget what he told me before leaving the makeup room. I'm just glad I found a job that allows me to act like I want to every day, minus the murder charges. We laughed about it, and I told him that I would be calling him soon. About 4 days later, I got his application out of the stack, and I was excited to call him and officially hire him. However, an old man answered the phone when I called. He went quiet when I asked him if the guy was home. After a short while, the old man asked me what I wanted with him. After I explained, the old man told me that the guy was no longer available. And naturally, I was very disappointed, because I knew this guy would have been great for the haunted house. Fast forward to December. I was randomly browsing the internet when I came across a news article on Yahoo's front page. It said, "Chilling 911 call finally released." There was a picture of someone who looked like the guy who had auditioned that year. After reading the article, I confirmed that it was the same guy. He had been arrested for shooting his mother and sister in the head. And I felt something that I had never felt before. I can't even explain it. Before clicking on the 911 call, I was expecting it to be a frantic neighbor, or maybe a family member. But no, it was him. He calmly spent 24 minutes explaining to the operator what he had done. Completely emotionless. Saying things like, I guess I'm pretty evil. Whatever. Listening to the call sent a chill up my spine. All I can say is you have to hear it for yourself. What if he had ended up working at my haunted house? Would he still have done it? Would he have killed somebody at the attraction? I think about this a lot more than I should, and I can't stand that.
Okay, is there any reason that you were so angry at your mother and your sister?
I don't know. I wasn't, it's weird. I wasn't even really angry with them. It just kind of happened. I've been kind of planning on killing for a while now.
The two of them, or just anybody?
Pretty much anybody. Just kind of really, I guess this is really selfish to say, but to me, I felt like they were just suffocating me in a way. I don't know. I think obviously, you know, I'm pretty, I guess, evil, but that's, whatever.
Okay.
There's always a reason to be afraid.
When I was in middle school and high school, my buddies and I were obsessed with studying the paranormal. I had every book on ghost lore that there was, and I had read them cover to cover. We would build websites with our favorite stories and local folk legends. We eventually began doing films and video expeditions at night to houses, cemeteries, caves, etc. in the surrounding area. This is just a short collection of a few of the more eerie and fun things that happened. It started off with my dad driving us out to these places at night. We would tramp off into a field or cemetery while he stayed in the car and smoked a cigarette. I remember one night we walked up a hill into a graveyard and immediately heard howling coming from the area to our right. 2 of the 4 of us freaked out and immediately headed back to the car. My buddy and I recognized it as a pack of coyotes and decided that they were more afraid of us than we were of them. There was still something that caught his eye, and from our left, behind us at this point as we were distracted by the coyotes, he tore out before I had a chance to see what it was, and I was too slow to realize that I was standing alone in the middle of a graveyard in the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere. When I turned around to see what the commotion was, I saw something that wasn't terrifying so much as befuddling. I heard the quick scamper of something relatively heavy running through the forest on the edge of the graveyard roughly 20 feet away. I shined my flashlight on it thinking that it was a deer, and I could see instantly that it was not. It was nothing. Not nothing as in there was nothing there. Nothing as in I could clearly see it kicking up leaves and hear the noise and even feel the vibration as it ran. But it was as if someone invisible were running through the forest not 5 yards away from me. I turned around and walked back to the car at that point, and haven't been back since. Later, when I got my license, I would drive us out on our own. One of our first treks was to the big house on my 16th birthday. We had to walk through about a mile of cow pasture to get there, but it was worth it. This was a classic haunted house with twisted stairways and decrepit fireplaces and a spooky attic. We had entirely too many people with us at that point, so it eventually devolved into me telling my best scary stories to guys laughing nervously and girls shrieking. We left after maybe an hour of exploring with nothing but some pictures of orbs and stuff to take back. My buddy the ghost hunter and I hung back when everyone else had left, walking a few yards behind. I suddenly got the feeling that we had left someone and did a quick head count of those in front. Nobody was missing. I looked behind at the house on top of the hill and saw a candlelight flitting from window to window in the attic. We sped our steps up a bit and caught up to the group without looking back again. To get to the big house, you have to go through a cemetery where a moderately famous Confederate officer was buried by the name of Champ Ferguson. My buddy and I decided to go back to this cemetery due to the violent nature of his death. He was hanged for treason in Nashville, and do some looking around. We took our flashlights and our camcorder. You have to park at the bottom of a small hill and climb some stairs to get into the small cemetery, and we made our way back into the very back where the officer's tomb was. I had my night vision on in my camcorder, and the screen flipped out, so I was using that to guide me through the otherwise completely dark graveyard. My friend had a flashlight that he was using, and I had mine in my pocket. We always checked the batteries to make sure that everything was working well before we left on these excursions. As I knelt down beside the headstone and was reading, the light from my friend's flashlight went out. I asked him to point it back in my direction to illuminate the faded text, and he said that he couldn't. It had died. I gave him mine, and he tried it, to no avail. Suddenly, the camcorder went out as well. We were in the middle of the dark, with no one around for miles. We did relatively well staying calm. We had to grope our way around the tombs to get back to the road, all the while with the intense feeling of being watched from multiple sides. I almost broke my ankle when I got back to the small retainer wall and forgot about the steps in my hurry to get back into the safety of the car. This happened about 9 years ago. My mom had made this friend who claimed to be psychic. I've never really believed that she was, but that's a completely different story to tell. Anyway, she said that she enjoyed going ghost hunting. Mind you, this is when Ghost Hunters was a pretty popular show, and my mom, sisters, and I decided that it would be fun. We didn't have the special equipment that they had, but we did have a video camera and a voice recorder. We were good to go. We visited several cemeteries that summer and got some pretty awesome footage, which I can share later. This one has always stuck with me. So, in doing research on where we should go next, I found a post about the cemetery in Lafayette, Colorado. It said supposedly that a vampire was buried there. The post said that some people believed this because he was from Transylvania, and a tree grew right up through the middle of the grave where they said his heart would have been. We decided to go. About 3 hours later, we showed up at this cemetery that looks more like a park. We get out of the car and begin walking into the cemetery, looking through all the headstones. Not very far into our walk, we come to the vampire's resting place. The headstone is a plain slab of concrete with a line down the middle and the name of the man, when he died, and where he was from. My sister, toting the video camera, comes walking up next to me and says, "So this is your stake, huh?" We didn't hear anything weird, and continued to walk around after that. The cemetery was pretty mild in comparison to the others that we had been to. The feelings weren't overbearing or scary. Suddenly, Sandy comes running toward us, whispering frantically, "We have to leave right now, they're coming." She's the psychic one. Anyway, we start rushing back to the car, and suddenly these police officers on bikes come riding up. They gave us a warning, saying that the park was officially closed for the evening, but that we could visit during the day. We drove home and plugged in the camera to check the footage. We got to the part where Elizabeth had asked, "So this is your steak, huh?" A reply immediately came saying, "Yes, my steak." We went back several times to make sure that we weren't imagining it, but every single one of us heard those words. Skip forward a few years. I was taking my mom to the dentist, and when we got there in the waiting room, there was a book of the most haunted places in Colorado. Well, of course it piqued my interest. During her visit, I scanned the book, and about halfway through, I came to the page about the Lafayette vampire. The crew who investigated his grave had asked a similar question to Elizabeth's, and the response that they got, wait for it, "Yes, my steak." I started laughing. We were so sure that we had imagined it because we had wanted to hear it. But there's no imagining two separate groups of people who got the same exact response. If you ever get to Lafayette, Colorado, check it out. The cemetery isn't a scary or overly creepy one, but the response that you get from the vampire is real. The man or men in the grave weren't actually vampires. They were mine workers. And if I remember correctly, they died of the 1918 Spanish flu. They were poor and didn't have the money to send their bodies back to their homes for burial, so they are buried here. I hope you enjoy this one as much as I have for the last several years. It's definitely one moment or two that I will never forget. When I was younger and inexperienced, I decided to go to a spot in my small town that is supposed to be haunted. The story goes back to the 60s, when a man and a woman with 2 children got into a major argument, and she decided to leave with her kids. She packed up and left with her son and daughter, and began to head over a small bridge just south of town, when she noticed that the husband was coming after her in his vehicle. Outraged, he ran her off the bridge and killed her and the 2 children. She now wanders the bed of what used to be a river, looking for her kids. So my buddy and I were investigating there, and we didn't hear anything, so we decided to go to the other side of the river. We were using EVP only at that time. The few hours we stayed there, we didn't pick up anything. We went home, transferred the sound to a computer, and plugged the computer into our television, and then we heard a few sounds. One was at a time in the investigation when my buddy had tripped over a stick poking out of the ground, and you could hear a little girl giggling. The second was when we decided to move to the other side of the river, and announced to the ghosts present that we were moving, and we heard the most eerie, slow-speaking voice of the little girl that said, "Please don't leave me." We were never touched or harmed in any way, but after a while we realized that we failed to introduce ourselves, and that we did not ask anything present to not follow or attach itself to us. The night afterward, my mother told me that she was going to take a bath, and asked us if anyone else had to use the restroom. My friends and I said no, and we continued to play our video game. Next thing we know, we heard screams coming from the bathroom. My stepfather ran into the bathroom, and my mother came out wrapped in a towel, mad and upset that we went ghost hunting, and she believed that something was messing with her. She went to her room and got dressed, and came back out and said that her back was burning. I lifted up the back of her shirt to see my initials scratched into her skin. At this time, I was a bit worried and frightened, and I told her to lay on the couch so that I could keep an eye on her, as she said that she was tired. She then woke up a few hours later, but didn't seem fully awake, almost as if she were in a trance, sweating profusely and her hair was soaked. She began mumbling weird things that we couldn't understand, and started saying 666 and drawing a pentagram in the air with her finger. I decided to look up a prayer, hoping that this would help. I ended up finding the St. Michael prayer, and my friends and I began chanting it. As we were chanting, she began screaming and cursing in a disembodied voice, and then suddenly dropped back down to the couch and passed back out. She woke up like nothing had even happened, and was confused as we explained. After time passed and nothing else occurred, I decided to go to a friend's house who was female. As I was headed there, I got a text message notification that said, "Where are you going? You're not." I clicked on the notification to finish reading the message, but the text had vanished. I called my mother and asked if anyone from the house had messaged me, and she said no. So ignoring it, I went on over to my friend's house. It was around 1 a.m., so we went to her room and laid in bed, and she got up saying that she had to go to the restroom. As I lay there, I began to hear growling noises coming from her bedroom closet. When she got back, because I wasn't going to go and look, I asked, "Do you have a dog in your closet or something?" And she replied, "No, I don't own a dog. We're not allowed to have animals here." I was freaked out the rest of the night, and didn't fall asleep until almost 4 a.m., listening to see if I could hear anything else. After awakening, of course, I was really tired. I called my mother to make sure everything was okay, and she said that nothing else happened while I was gone. And nothing else has happened since. Moral of the story is don't meddle in things that you don't understand or have not studied or prepared to deal with. I'm still interested in ghost hunting, and may do so in the future as I'm now more educated on the subject, and will take better precautions from here on out. I live on the East Coast, so the cemeteries are ancient, mostly from the 1700s. Me and a group of friends went to a local cemetery and decided to do some light, no equipment, just our phone flashlights, ghost hunting. Nothing too eventful happened for the first half hour as we walked around the soldier memorials. We crossed an old limestone bridge with a little creek underneath. As we started to leave the memorials, I said goodbye, and people started to feel dizzy or weak in the knees with pressure in the back of their heads and upper neck. A few even felt really tired afterward. We went on a little further, and a couple of the group members decided to split off, so me and 2 others were going to the oldest section of the cemetery. A girl kept hearing her name, and kept going ahead of us. After we all regrouped and talked over everything that had happened, the other guy in the group pulled his necklace off to give it to his girlfriend and found out that it was spinning without his hand or arm moving. I personally held his arm and felt his hand. It was not moving. It spun for about a minute, then started making an X shape, and then slowly died out. After that, nothing else happened to me or my group. However, the couple said that they were hearing people calling to them from the woods, into an area without roads or any buildings for miles. Needless to say, they thought that we were playing with them, but we were on opposite sides of the cemetery entirely. Just yesterday I was talking to a girl from the group, and she said that at home she heard the same voices, plus screaming and people knocking on her door. Today, I found out that she's in jail. What do I do? Should we go back to the cemetery and apologize? Or should we just forget that it happened? There's this large section of southwest Austin, Texas that used to be known as the Eanes Marshall Ranch. There's a story to be found about a man who was murdered by bandits, and his body was buried in an unmarked grave on the side of the dirt road after being discovered by the ranch owner. Eventually, the body was found by police over 100 years later while searching for evidence of deer poaching. Thus, a local ghost story was reinvigorated and spread to a new generation. When I was in high school, my friends and I got it in our heads to go out there and do some ghost hunting before the house was torn down to make way for a church. We took a couple of disposable film cameras, along with a Ouija board, and headed out under the cover of dark. We got there a little after 11 p.m. We hung around for several hours taking photos of nothing, literally pointing the cameras into the darkness and saying, "May I please take your picture?" Click. We had a no smoking rule, and we were not using the flash for the outside shots. We made our way back inside the main house. The smallest member of the group shimmied through an unsecured window in a small side room and opened a door for the rest of us. We took some photos inside with the flash on. My friends spent a good bit of time on the Ouija board. I declined to participate in that part and went outside. They came out and claimed to have contacted an entity through the Ouija board. I was like, okay, sure. We left after all the film was spent, and we got bored with it. We never did hear the legendary wagon or horses that supposedly come through. Nothing spooky happened at all while we were there. The next day, the cameras were dropped off at Eckerd's to be sent off for development. A few days later, the rolls came back with a lot of black nothing, which was to be expected when taking photos outside at night with no flash. There were a few shots that were taken inside the house while using a flash that had some things that you might call orbs, but those could be explained away as dust or bugs. However, the photo I'm talking about still sends chills down my spine every time I see it. We were very strict about not using the flash outside and not smoking, as I said. We wanted to have our best chance at capturing something like this without having a seed of doubt that it could have been a trick of the light or of the camera. Two of my friends who took part in the Ouija session had several unexplained glass-breaking incidents. They said it happened whenever they were talking about the entity or said its name. They were sitting in the car while parked when the passenger window formed spiderweb cracks like a rock had hit it, but no impact was heard. A few days later, glass cups fell out of their kitchen cabinets, no fronts, just open shelves, when no one was in the kitchen and all the cats were in the living room with them. More than a few of their picture frames had the glass shatter while still hanging on the wall. When they stopped mentioning the entity's name, the activity calmed down and eventually stopped.